What's up, everybody? Welcome to System Crafters. I'm David Wilson, and today I'm having a terrible amount of issues getting the stream going, and I've got a lot of other things that I have to tell you about. But first of all, I just want to say thank you all for being here today. I'm trying something a little bit different right now. I'm actually, and you're gonna see all my email notifications. I'm actually streaming from a different location entirely, and that explains part of the reason why I'm having issues. It also explains why I don't have my face cam on right now, because what happened is I traveled to Greece. I'm in Greece for maybe another 5 weeks because I'm visiting family here. My wife's family is here. And when I packed everything up, I had everything except for the power cable for my camera. So right now, today, I don't have any face camera to go with the stream, which is a shame because I know that everyone's coming here just to see my face, you know, not because of the content, just because of my beautiful face. But yes, this is the problem I'm having today, is that I basically had to replicate my entire setup in a new location, and we're sort of dealing with the ramifications of that right now. So I apologize for the issues, but I think that I'll figure something out for that in the coming weeks. I'll either get the same cable ordered, or I'll find a way to use my phone as a webcam or something like that. So we'll figure it out. But at least for today, we won't have any kind of face camera, which is a little bit weird because I feel like it enables me to communicate better with you when you can see my face and my expressions and whatnot. And I feel like I've lost a dimension. You said you can see my avatar still? I don't see where you're seeing it. But anyway, it's a shame, but yeah. Oh, yeah. The other thing that happened right before I started streaming is I restarted Emacs to sort of get a fresh session going to avoid some problems, and I exposed another problem with the build of Emacs native comp that I'm using right now. Apparently, it gets into a loop where it's trying to load all the packages, and it keeps trying to compile them, but for some reason it can't actually put them in the desired output folder, probably because it's trying to write them to the GNU store path for some reason. I don't exactly know why. And it basically was eating all my CPU, and I can't stream if I have my CPU constantly churning the entire time. So I had to quickly switch back to the normal Emacs 27 build, and now with that, I'm okay. But I don't know. I don't think I'm going to have any downsides from that particular thing, but we'll see what happens as the stream goes on. Let me know if at any point the microphone audio is too loud. I had to adjust it a little bit, but we'll see if it's a problem. Anyway, so let's see. Anything else interesting to talk about? I got a lot of people watching the video on installing Geeks this week, which is great. I'm really happy that people were interested in trying that out. Had some feedback from a few people, and I wanted to cover some tips today on maybe shortcutting some of the common questions you're gonna have. I've got a few things prepared here to show you, and also we can answer any questions you may have. And I'm intending to do videos to explain some of this stuff in more detail, but at least for now, I wanted to give some information that might be important to those who are trying Geeks for the first time this week, because as you might be able to tell, whenever you get Geeks installed, it's a bit different than other Linux distributions, and it's harder to set up certain things at first. So I hopefully today what I'll show you will help you to get past some of those issues that you might be seeing. So before I go any further, I wanted to say hello to the people who have shown up today. If I could see everyone's names, let's see if it shows me the whole list. Garjola, Drishal, Christian, Alex, Diego, Pavel, Martin, Anders. Let's see. Who else? A lot of the same names. Robert, John, Daigo, Amalvidea, Alexander, F Society, Julian, Tomas, Nicholas, Appenzel, Mr. Bill, Julian. I think I said Julian already. Anyway, this is hard to read all these names. I really need something that will help me automate this whole process where I can see the list of people who are here and then be able to welcome everybody in a more reasonable way. Hey, Subaru and Antonio and Luis. So anyway, let's see. There's a couple questions I think I saw here. Under says, say hello to Greece. Well, I've already said hello to Greece because I've been here for maybe... this is the third day I've been here, I think, so far. Let's see... Someone asked me about Gentoo. What are my thoughts on Gentoo? I used Gentoo probably in... It was around 2006 to 2000... Well, maybe 2005 to 2007. And it was cool. I really enjoyed using Gentoo, but I eventually switched to Ubuntu, which sounds pretty ridiculous, but I kind of like wanted to have precompiled builds of software because, you know, compiling your software is fun and you can do some customization with that, but at the same time, I was kind of just wanted to use stuff and not have to spend so much time compiling. So I switched to Ubuntu and used that for a while, and then, you know, just switched to other distributions. But Gentoo is very cool. I like it a lot, and I think it's really cool that it's still going after all this time. Shabam says, unregular resolution. Yes, you're right. That's because I'm using my X1 Nano to stream, and it does not have a 16:9 resolution. It's actually 16:10 or something like that, so it's more square shaped, so you won't see it filling the entire frame, which is unfortunate, but it's sort of just what we have to deal with right now because I blew up my other streaming machine. So if I was able to use that machine, we would have 16:9 and everything would look great, but I'm happy that I'm able to stream with this machine at least because it's very small. Garjola says that System Crafters used Ubuntu. Now that's on record. I have no shame in saying that I used Ubuntu. I mean, you know, sometimes you gotta, you know, get work done and not mess around with your setup all day. But now I'm saying that as the person who's recommending that people use Geeks, which is probably the one of the harder things you can do with Linux. But you know, it's all in good fun. There's a participants menu item under the upper right 3-dot menu. Really? Wow, amazing. I love that. Thanks so much, Tomas. That's awesome. I've never seen that before. So, some people I see here that I didn't see before. Epic Patrick, Miljan C, another Pavel is here, and Taeyun Kim. Awesome. Thanks for pointing that out. That's great. From Gentoo to Ubuntu, why not Arch? I did use Arch, or Arc, or however you're supposed to pronounce that. I used Arc between 2013 to 2016, I would say. Probably that amount of time. Thanks, Amalvidea, for the $5 in Super Chat. What advantages does Geeks offer over the other major Linux distributions? I cover that in a lot more detail in the first video in the Craft Your System with Geeks, or with GNU Guix, whatever it's called. But just generally, the big thing for me is reproducibility, being able to have my entire system configuration and all the packages that I use checked into source control, so it's easy to apply the same config to multiple machines and not having to, like, let's say if I had to reinstall my Geeks distribution from scratch, it's very easy for me to get back to exactly where I was before, because most of what I use is configured in a declarative fashion where all the services, all the packages, and the system configuration in general is in source control, and I can just apply it to a new machine pretty easily. Usually the only things you have to change are anything that's specific to like, let's say a new computer. If you got another computer that has a different hardware that you have to use, you might need to add some extra configuration for that, but it's very little work compared to like having to install everything from scratch, remember all the packages you want to use, set up services by hand, etc. So to me, that's the biggest benefit of NixOS or GNU Guix compared to other more traditional, I guess you could say. I mean, traditional is a weird word to use with Linux distributions, mainly because there's so much variety in distributions out there. But I think that NixOS and GNU Guix sort of live in their own universe. So that's why I like that type of distribution better. The declarative, functional package manager, system configuration style distribution. It's kind of hard to nail it down because Geeks and NixOS both do a lot of stuff. Abdel Rahman says, I'm using NixOS right now, but I might hop to Geeks because of your videos. Well, you know, it's worth trying, I would say. If you've got a good setup with NixOS, I guess the upside is that you can always reapply it pretty easily if you wanted to go back. But yeah, Geeks, it will require a little bit more effort to get to a similar level of comfort as you might have with NixOS, just because there's not the same number of packages for NixOS as there is with Geeks. And also, you have to do a little bit more legwork yourself sometimes on things. So it will be a very fun thing to try. I'll tell you that. You should definitely try it. Shabam says, I didn't know you were on holiday. You should probably enjoy normal life sometimes. Well, the thing is, if I was only going to be gone for 2 weeks, I would probably just take time off from streaming and making videos. But since I'm going to be out, I'm out of the country for like 6 weeks, I didn't want to leave the channel behind and not have anything going. And I like streaming, so I'm just going to try to keep doing it while I'm here, despite the fact that I'm running into nothing but trouble. It's fun, so I just want to keep doing it. And my family here is also very supportive and really helpful in trying to make sure that I can do this. So it works out really well. I don't have any problems. Anders says, so Geeks is CF Engine or Chef. Yeah, it has qualities of one of those type of declarative system tools like Chef or Ansible or anything like that. But it's more, I don't know, it has a lot more functionality than those do. And it also has a real programming language that you're using for writing the configuration, which is a big benefit whenever you want to customize things further. You don't have to really depend on the package author to make things work a certain way for you. You can actually go and change whatever you want by inheriting a package definition and then changing anything about it. You can change all services that way. You can tweak pretty much everything in the system. I want to make some videos that actually show what that means in practice, because it's kind of hard to conceptualize whenever you haven't really spent much time looking at the code for Geeks. But it's pretty impressive what you can do whenever you finally start learning the internals of Geeks and realize what it gives you. It's basically just an entire tool set for system management with Scheme, with a Guile Scheme, which is pretty awesome. Let's see. The Zircon says, Ubuntu leads the pack for a reason. Devs, especially dev teams, prefer Ubuntu because of its no fuss, no nonsense, get to work in a couple of minutes. Yeah, absolutely. Most software that you would want to use on Linux is available in Ubuntu, either through the Ubuntu package store or third-party package repositories, or even the Snapcraft store. So if you want to be productive in Linux without having to know a whole lot about Linux, Ubuntu is definitely a good place to start. So yeah, it's usually people like us who, the people who are here watching this stream right now, who want to have more control. So we go to things like, let's say, Gentoo or NixOS or Geeks, etc. Andre says Ubuntu is based on Debian. That's why it's in the lead. Yeah, that's true. Debian is an amazing project, an amazing foundation for other distributions. I've been using Debian more recently for server stuff, and I think it's amazing. It's a really good free distribution. It follows the FSDG, the Free Software Distribution Guidelines, I think it's called. Isotidis. Here in Kalamata, that's awesome. I'm currently in Athens, but I'm going to be going to the Peloponnese probably next week, I think. So I'll be in a village in the Peloponnese streaming. Hopefully the internet holds out there. Antonio says, hello from Mexico. Well, hello from Greece. F Society says, I just switched from Arch to Gentoo, and am in love. Maybe in 1 to 3 months I'm bored from Gentoo. Should I switch to Void or to Geeks first? I haven't used Void yet, so I don't really know what the benefit of using Void would be. I know that a lot of people have used it and tried it, but yeah, I would say, the thing you should do if you're not really settled on a Geeks, on a Linux distribution yet, is just try different things that seem interesting to you, and you may have to take a sort of a path through which ones you use for a while, because thanks, Tomas. I don't know why it's on Top Shot again. it may take a while for you to sort of figure out which ones that you prefer. And also for something like Geeks, sometimes it does take, a few weeks to get fully comfortable again once you get it set up. So it's kind of a distribution that you need to experiment a little bit with so that you can migrate over to it. But, like sometimes it's better to just, pull the Band-Aid and just try something that's harder to set up and then figure it out, which is basically what I did with Geeks. I was very curious about using Geeks, and I finally decided, you know what, I'm not going to figure this out until I actually install it on my actual laptop and try to make things work. And it took me a couple weeks maybe to fix the major issues that I had with it. But then once I got into a more or less basic comfortable state, I was able to gradually improve my configuration to the point where it doesn't change much now, because I've got things set away that I like it, and the system is reproducible, and I don't really have to think too much about it anymore because I don't change it really, except for when I want to try new things. Antonio says, very new to Lisp dialects. Would you mind quick explaining Common Lisp, eLisp, Guile for the newbies? Which one to use to learn Lisp? That's a great question. And even though it's kind of off topic here, I like the question, so I'm going to answer that. So there, in the world of Lisp, there is two main branches, I would say. There's Common Lisp and there's Scheme, and both of those languages, they share the same core syntax where you have lists of symbols and other primitives like numbers and strings, etc., that are contained within parentheses that form lists, basically. So that's about where the similarities stop, because the semantics of Common Lisp and Scheme are both very different. And it's kind of hard to explain the difference between those right now, but mainly just to say that Common Lisp is a kind of a very big language. Sorry if you hear my child screaming right now. Common Lisp is a very big language specification that has a lot of stuff in it that is meant to be used for practical purposes, kind of designed by committee. And it's a lot of people use it for getting real stuff done. As you can see with programs like Nixt, the web browser, that's written in Common Lisp. And then there's also Scheme, which is more rooted in academia, where it's written to be closer to lambda calculus, where you're sort of doing computation in a more pure functional style in a lot of ways. And there's sort of semantic differences between them in how scoping works and a lot of things like that. To me, I prefer Scheme just because I like the way the language is designed better. Guile Scheme is so the thing about Scheme is there's many dialects of Scheme. So once you get into the Scheme branch, you have many dialects that all have sort of common stuff at the base, because they typically are following one of the main Scheme standards, like the R6RS, R7RS. There's like different versions basically of the main Scheme spec. And then there's a variety of different add-on specifications called SRFIs, SRFIs, which have added behavior, and it sort of depends on which Scheme implementation you're using to see which SRFIs are implemented there. A lot of times SRFIs are written in a portable way, so they can be used in different Scheme implementations. But I guess the problem I'm pointing to here is that when you learn Scheme, you kind of get stuck with a particular Scheme implementation in a lot of ways, because you have to make a choice based on sort of what features it provides. And then if you want to switch to another one, you may not have some of the same stuff available to you. I suppose that's possible too with Common Lisp implementations, but I think there's less variety in Common Lisp implementations these days. A lot of people just stick with SBCL or Allegro Common Lisp, those kind of things. But Emacs Lisp is more like Common Lisp, but it's not really Common Lisp. It's sort of its own Lisp, but I would say it has more in common with Common Lisp. And there's also extensions to Emacs Lisp that give you Common Lisp features. So it's definitely more of a Common Lisp style Lisp than Scheme. So to start with something, I don't know which one is the best to start with. I would say the best thing to start with would be Emacs Lisp, just because it's very easy to write something that's useful, and you're going to be writing Emacs Lisp anyway if you're configuring Emacs. So that's a good starting point. And then once you understand Emacs Lisp, it will be much easier to pick up Common Lisp for sure. Scheme will be different in a variety of ways. However, a lot of your knowledge will probably transfer, and it won't be too different. So I would say, yeah, maybe Emacs Lisp is a good starting point because it gives you a very clear environment in which you can experiment and start writing more and more ambitious code to do certain things, because you can do a lot with Emacs Lisp. It's not necessarily the greatest language ever, but it is very capable in terms of enabling you to write your own deep customization of Emacs. F23A None says, "Hi guys, quick question. Is it possible to compile Emacs without unnecessary things like Tetris, Snake, two browsers, etc.?" I don't know. There's a lot of compiler flags for Emacs, but I haven't actually looked into that yet to see if it's possible. My guess is that the answer is no, but I would be very happy to hear that it's possible, because I agree there's a lot of stuff here that's not necessary. It would be nice if you could get rid of some of these things that are built in that you don't really need. Garjola says, "I still hesitate in trying Geeks. I have one machine where I upgrade Debian every couple of years. Now with a Geeks package manager on Debian, I think my needs are covered." Well, I think that using Geeks as a package manager, if it works for you, is a great way to get the benefits of Geeks at the user level without having to go all the way to having your entire system managed by Geeks. The benefit of it is that you have a stable distribution where you can depend on it on the packages you install at a system level, and then for anything that you use at the user level, your own day-to-day packages, you could install all of those with Geeks, and then get the benefits of having the latest versions of packages, and also the sort of benefits of having all of your manifests, your package manifests checked into source control, so you can easily install those on different machines. So I think it's a good thing, a good middle ground. If you wanted to use Geeks but not have to use it to manage your entire system, using it as a package manager on an existing stable distro is a great idea, especially now that Geeks actually has an official package in Debian in the Bullseye release. I guess it's the sort of the unstable right now release. It's easy to set up Geeks and start using it there. Yeah, the nice thing about Emacs Lisp also, adding to what Tomas said, is that it gives you that immediate feedback loop that you get with Lisps. That's sort of one of the big benefits to using a Lisp, is that you can do interactive programming through a REPL. And with Emacs, you get it immediately. You can just use Control-X, Control-E, or the various key bindings for evaluating Emacs Lisp code in Emacs, and you see the effects of the code that you wrote immediately, and you can really quickly iterate on what you wrote. So it's a great way to learn the Lisp development mindset, which is often very different from other languages you might be used to. I mean, you can do interactive development with Python, but I don't exactly know how often people do REPL-based development with Python, even though it is possible. I think Lisp makes it a little bit easier. Garjola says Debian Bullseye is coming in a month or so. That would be great. That's really cool if that's the case. Antonio says, starting to use eLisp in my org files, ditch classic spreadsheet programs, and now use org tables with formulas. Yeah, I started doing that too, and it's pretty powerful. I think the user interface isn't necessarily great when using org tables, but I've done some calculations for things like taxes and business expenses and whatnot using org tables, and it's worked really well for that. I was happy with the outcome, and it's really, really nice that the file is text and you can check it in the source control. So you don't get locked into a particular platform, basically, or proprietary program. If you just have text files, there's so much you can do with text files. You can search text files really easily. Obviously, you can put them in source control, and you can run them through other programs for text manipulation. So being able to do more advanced things with org mode is really a great thing, I think. F Society says, which YouTube do you watch? I don't really watch many videos in the same topic area that I make videos in. I mean, I'll watch like a DistroTube video every now and then, just whenever he talks about something interesting. I did watch his more recent video where he's telling people what Emacs is really about, and I think he was right in that video in a lot of ways. I'm glad he made that video. Not only because that's something that needed to be said for people so they really understand what to expect from Emacs, but also because anytime he makes an Emacs video, it turns out that more people start finding my videos. So it's sort of a selfish reason to be happy he made that video, but it does work out well for this channel and for people to find what we've been talking about here, because it's difficult to really cover Emacs in depth unless you really dedicate your channel to that, which is basically what I've done. So if people learn about Emacs from DistroTube and then they jump over here to learn more about it, then it's good for everybody, I think, because people can learn some things that Derek doesn't have time to teach on his own, basically, because he makes a lot of videos on other topics as well. As far as other things on YouTube, I watch an excessive amount of people who are streaming the game Call of Duty Warzone, specifically Dr. Disrespect. So yeah, that's probably the thing I watch the most on YouTube. It's an absurd amount of hours that I'm watching that. So let's see. Maybe I'll go ahead and get into the topic for today. And I'll go ahead and just say up front that this is not going to be a comprehensive set of information. I'm more just giving this as a reference point so that people can find things that they may be looking for before I actually get to make videos about all this, because it will take time for me to make a complete set of videos that can tell you, end to end, how should you use Geeks. So I wanted to just give you a few different pieces of information today that might be useful. F23A None says, are you satisfied with EXWM in regard for it to be single-threaded? Well, the single-threaded aspect isn't necessarily the biggest problem, in my opinion. The biggest problem at the moment is that it's unmaintained. I don't know what happened to the maintainer of EXWM. I'm kind of worried about him or them. I don't want to presume anything here, but they basically disappeared at the middle of last year and have not done anything on GitHub since then. So I don't know what that means for that person, but the thing I fear the most for EXWM is that it's not maintained currently, and I don't think anybody has sort of taken up the mantle to continue forward with it. The thing that's weird about EXWM is not necessarily EXWM's fault, but I think things just keep evolving over time with different applications. One thing I noticed the last few days is that whenever I use Qt Browser, sometimes when a Qt Browser tab opens, or when Qt Browser window opens, something happens where EXWM is no longer able to take keyboard input or mouse input, and my session is basically hosed at that point, and I have to kill Emacs entirely. And I don't know exactly what is happening here, but what I've seen in the past from bug reports is that sometimes programs will do things that break EXWM's logic. So if for some reason Qt Browser made some change to how it does window management, or maybe some property that sets on Windows now, then EXWM has to respond to that. And if there's nobody maintaining EXWM, then we might end up with a broken EXWM at some point. So I am slightly concerned about that, but it hasn't really been a major issue yet. However, at some point, we may have to consider forking EXWM to try to fix some of this stuff, and also the related library. What is it? Emacs XELB or something like that. So we may have to take our fate into our own hands at some point and try to figure out how to take that project forward. So I hope that the maintainer is okay. COVID did happen last year. I'm not making any assumptions that COVID is what happened to them, but life has been very different in the last year. So there's any number of things that could have changed in their life. So I hope they're okay. So I did see Shom say something in the IRC. How does David Will have time to watch hours of YouTube? Well, I mean, it's sort of like passive watching, where I'll have it on the side while I'm doing other things, but it is a little bit of a distraction sometimes. I have not figured out time dilation. I just I have very specific times I do certain things, and it works out. Is there not an extension WM for EXWM, something like XEXWM? Someone did write something. I think it was Tumashu wrote. What was it called? There is another window manager that sort of builds on top of EXWM, but I can't remember the name of it at the moment. But yeah, I think that really to maintain EXWM effectively, you're going to have to fork both of the main projects, because a lot of this complexity comes from interacting with the X11 or XCLB or XCB or whatever the APIs are that deal directly with window management, and deal with all the quirks of various programs. I think that's a lot of what is needed for this. Is whenever a user has a problem, you have to sort of diagnose why that problem is happening, which often requires looking at logs to see what's happening in the X session, and then come up with a fix for it. So EXWM codebase has gotten more complex over time because it has to deal with all of these things. So yeah, it's not going to be an easy task to take over maintenance of that, but I think it's necessary because there's a lot of people I see who use EXWM, Emacs power users who want to be in Emacs all the time. So if we want to continue that, then I think we're going to have to take up the mantle at some point and help out. Okay, so let's talk about this the topic for today. So you've installed GNU Guix. Now what? So I have a list of things here that I've got prepared to talk about. Not super in depth, but we'll see what the various topics here entail. And then I also want to hear your questions about other things after I get through this stuff, so that maybe I can think of some other pointers that I didn't think of whenever I was preparing this. So first of all, one thing I get asked about a lot is how do you, since there's a lot of Emacs packages that are actually a part of Guix. So using Guix, you can actually install Emacs packages, and this is an alternative to using package.el or straight.el. It's another way to install packages, and there are benefits to using Guix to install your Emacs packages. So one benefit is that if a package you use has a dependency on an external program, you can actually install that program along with the package. So for instance, if you use a package that uses ripgrep for more fast grepping over files in a folder, that Emacs package can actually pull in ripgrep as a dependency, causing that to be installed and prepared for use with that package. Another thing that I can think of, I think it's all the icons. I believe it does a little bit of extra stuff on that to make sure those fonts are available whenever you install the package. There's a few other packages. Telegra.el is the Telegram client. It will compile the native program that's needed to actually do the connection to the Telegram protocol and prepare that for you, so you don't have to do it yourself. That was sort of one of the headaches of using Telegra in the past, is having to make sure that thing gets compiled. vterm is another one where it has native components that have to be compiled, and often can be a problem for people who are installing vterm on a Linux distribution that doesn't have a compiler installed by default. So if you install the Emacs vterm package from Guix, you get the native components already set up, and you don't have to think about it at all. So I feel that it does provide some benefits from that perspective. The other perspective is that you can have all of your Emacs packages together in one profile and keep those checked in so that you can pull them down more easily. And there's some integration between Guix and Emacs via the Emacs Guix package, which I'll talk about also in a little bit, which gives you some more benefits that are kind of nice to have. So if you want to install packages for Emacs with Guix, there's a very important thing that you have to know about, which is the way that Emacs integration with Emacs packages works in Guix is that you have to have Emacs itself installed inside of the same profile that you're installing the Emacs packages in. Now, I don't know if it's so the easiest way to do that is to just use Guix install to install Emacs, and then to install any packages that you want. And if you want to find packages for Emacs, all you need to do is just Guix search Emacs dash, I wonder if star will work here, Emacs dash star, and you're going to see a ton of packages that a lot of packages that you want to use are here. So let me just cancel that. So a lot of stuff that you would probably pull from package.el, using Melpa or straight.el from a Git repo, you can find them on in the Guix package repository, and you can just use Guix install to install all of those directly. Now, I don't think that using Guix install is the best way to use Guix to install packages. I think using a manifest is the best way to do that, and we haven't really talked about that in depth yet, so you may have to think about this again later whenever I do that video. But If you have a manifest file that has a bunch of Emacs packages in it, you also definitely want to have the Emacs package itself in there as well. Yeah, Tomas is giving a command line here that we can use to grab just the names of those packages, which is definitely useful. Just throwing it through grep, basically. So if you want to see my own Emacs manifest file, config/geeks/manifest/Emacs, you can see that I have Emacs here. I also have Emacs native comp, but I had to change that right before the stream because I was having major issues with native comp. But then I have a list of a whole bunch of other packages here that I'm installing using Geeks. So it's the majority of the stuff that I use, basically. There are other packages that I will install using straight.el, mainly because either they only exist as Git repositories and we just haven't contributed to the Geeks package repo yet, or there's like a newer version that exists on the Git repo that isn't in Geeks yet, and I'm just too lazy to go and push a patch to update the version, which I shouldn't be doing. I should really be trying to get all the packages that I use into Geeks so that other people can benefit from them, and so that I don't have to use like half in straight.el and half in Geeks, because there are some issues with that. And I'll talk about that in just a second. I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole. So one thing that we'll talk about in a later video is how you can write out your manifest for the packages you want to use with Emacs using your org files. So in this org file, if I look for Geeks packages right there, you can see that for a certain section of my org configuration file, like for the package management section here, I'll have the Emacs list block that has all the configuration for that package, but then I'll also have a separate block for Geeks packages, which is basically just a list of package names that eventually gets rolled into a manifest file, that manifest file that you saw before. So if you go back to the emacs.scm file, you'll see Emacs use package as the first one here, and that's because it shows up here inside of my my emacs.org file. And the next thing you'll see is Emacs node littering, which is the next thing you see in this file as well. So I'm not going to go into detail on that right now because that's a whole other video in itself. But just something that you should be aware of is that whenever you install Emacs packages, make sure that you install the Emacs package itself or the Emacs native comp package if you're using that, because the way that Emacs resolves packages is related to which profile the Emacs package itself is installed in. So I think what that means is if you install Emacs as a system level package, like in your system configuration, and then you install Emacs packages using Geeks install in your user profile, those two things may not work together. So no matter what you do, you should definitely try to install Emacs in your user profile or your manifest file along with your Emacs packages you install there, and then everything should work fine. Whenever you start up Emacs, it will automatically find all the auto loads for all your packages and prepare those for use. So let's go back to the notes here. So yeah, I want to cover this in more detail in another video because I think this is one of the nicest things about using Emacs for managing packages, because you can do this thing where you have your package list stored in a manifest. I mean, obviously, if you're using use package along with package.el and or straight.el, you can get a similar functionality because you can just get it to automatically download the packages if they're not installed already. However, at least with package.el, it's not as easy to pin the version of a package that you're using. With Geeks, it's much easier to do that because you're basically just pinning the commit of the Geeks repository in your channels configuration at any given point in time. Straight.el does give you the ability to freeze your package list to get the exact same versions of everything on another machine. However, it doesn't do that by default, and it's not necessarily easy to, or it's not obvious how to set that up. So I think using Geeks for managing Emacs packages is sort of like the best of both worlds. Now, one thing I did want to point out here is that if you use package and you use ensure t on your packages to install them using package.el, any packages that you've installed with Geeks, use ensure nil to make sure that the package does not get downloaded using package.el, because you're going to have overlap between two packages, and it's probably going to end up picking the one that came from package.el instead, which could lead to some trouble. And the other thing that I was talking about before, where if you install packages using both Geeks and and package.el or straight.el. If you use both of those at the same time, you could run into issues because if you install a package, like let's say LSP mode using package.el or straight.el, it may install dependencies of itself that come from Melpa that are overriding things that are in your Geeks package dependencies, basically. And you could have problems between packages that were installed in Geeks versus installed by package.el. So you'll have incompatibilities between dependencies, and that can sometimes be hard to resolve. So it's definitely better if you can to only use packages from one of those sources. Either use all from Geeks or all from package.el or straight.el, because you'll run into problems if you use both at the same time. Now, having said that, I do use both at the same time, and I'm telling you from my own personal experience that this can be a problem. However, it isn't a problem often enough that I have a great deal of trouble with it. So your mileage may vary. Definitely, you take my advice with a grain of salt, try it out, and if you run into issues, you should use that as your first thing you look for if you have issues with the package. So Drashal says, can you not use require instead of use package? Yeah, you can definitely use require, but the point of using use package is that you can more concisely express configuration for a package at the same time. This is not a good example because right here I should have just used require, but my actual Evo configuration has a lot more stuff in it. So for that particular use package expression, I would not want it to try to automatically install the Evil package from Melpa. Yeah, Benoit says there's a default configuration to set ensure nil by default. So yeah, I'm basically just pointing this out in case someone did turn ensure on by default, which, is something that people might do. I think I used to do it also because it was, better than just having ensure T everywhere, but I may still do it actually. But yeah, it's just something to be aware of. If you have it turned to automatically download packages by default, you'll want to turn that off for each package that you're pulling from Geeks. Let's see. Trude EH says, what's the main difference between Geeks and Debian Archbase distros? Well, the main difference is that Geeks is centered around a functional package manager, which allows you to do a lot of things like rollbacks, roll forwards, and also a declarative system configuration tool. So it's very different in how you use it and how you set up your system. With Arch, you're basically just installing a bunch of packages and then manually tweaking configuration files at the system level. You don't do that at all with Geeks. The Geeks configuration system handles all that for you. Tomas says, maybe you can add the Geeks package name as an org source block property of the block which configures it. You can save on lines, and it may also be easier to query them. Yeah. The way that I do this right now is definitely not ideal. I've got a couple of ideas that I want to try out in the future to make this easier. But the one that you just mentioned is actually not one of the ideas I had in mind. So that is a good idea, actually. It could be something that I could try. So that is a cool idea. Let's see. FD. I'm going to say FD because I think your name may be a little bit borderline offensive. I'm not sure exactly if I'm interpreting that correctly. So FD says, it's a pity that Geeks doesn't work on macOS. Yeah, it would be nice if it did, but I think that there's probably not a lot of motivation on behalf of the Geeks maintainers to make it work on macOS because that environment is kind of hostile to free software. So I don't think that's ever going to happen. NixOS does work on macOS, I think. So that is a very good option to get similar behavior if you want to have declarative package configurations and to be able to use it for dependency management for projects and whatnot. So NixOS is the next best thing, I think, for macOS. Let's see. And FD says, Geeks does seem like what Nix should have been to begin with. Well, yeah, I agree. I'm not exactly sure what the motivation was behind the Nix language. I guess maybe because it's more like Haskell. I think they were sort of using Haskell for what they do. I could be wrong about that because I haven't really looked into the history of it. But yeah, inventing a language to use for that is not as good of an idea as using an existing language that makes it very easy to express things, like a Lisp-derived language, as in the case of Geeks. I think Geeks may do other things a little bit differently as well, because you're actually using real code to manipulate configuration. So you have a lot more power at your disposal to customize package configurations, service configurations, etc. I mean, it's kind of amazing what you can do. I've only just scratched the surface in the work I've been doing recently to produce a better installation image that makes it easier to install Guix for people who need to use the full Linux kernel. But some of the things I'm looking into for creating server configurations and also some other nice features. I think that Guix has a tremendous amount of power, and it may be the Linux distribution with the most potential for the future to like totally change how things are done. However, at the current phase, it's very difficult for the average user to just get started with it. So I'm hoping to help solve that problem over time, either through contributing to Guix or to make my own sort of configuration overlay on top of Guix to provide a more user-friendly experience. But I think that it can't be 100% user-friendly just because you sort of need to dive into the code to do anything non-trivial in Guix at some point, which is basically the same thing as using Emacs. If you use Emacs, you can't just go and use the configuration UI to do everything you could want to do. I mean, you can, I guess, but you're missing out on a lot of the power of Emacs if you don't write actual Emacs Lisp code. And I think that Guix is very similar in that regard, where if you're going to use Guix, you might as well get used to the idea of writing scheme code and really learning how to leverage the tool to its strengths. Juanito says, how large do you recommend for root? I have 50 gigabyte for root and filled up in one day. So yeah, 50 gigabyte for Guix can be small. Filling it up in one day is kind of surprising, but not out of the ordinary. The thing about Guix is that anytime you install packages or update your system configuration, it's basically generating a completely new derivation from the configuration you give it. And when you also, excuse me, when you update your packages, it doesn't necessarily delete the older version of the package that you had installed. Both of them will still remain installed, and you have to use a command called geeksgc to clean those up if you need to get some space back. I don't remember if I covered geeksgc yet in one of those videos, but I'll definitely have to cover it at some point, just so that so that you can learn how to clean up that disk space, because at some point using Guix, you're gonna run out of space. Even if you have, 500 gigabytes of space, eventually you're gonna run out of space just because of the way that Guix works. It may take a year or two, but using geeksgc is the way to get around that. Garjola says, somebody on IRC said yesterday that there was an issue with the latest image you provided for the install. Were you aware of that? I saw that, but I haven't been able to follow IRC very much since I've been jet lagged like crazy the last couple of days. So I didn't follow up on it. If you happen to have the original message, I'd be happy to take a look at it again, though, because I don't want anybody to have trouble with it. But it could just be a Guix issue. I think I remember there being some issue even before partitioning, is what they were saying. Like they had a crash of some sort. So yeah, I would have to look into that to see what the problem is there. It is possible that it's a Guix installer issue that we might need to talk to someone like Matthew on the Guix maintainer team to investigate that. Juanito says, I actually found the error you said. For some reason, the installer mounts the USB as boot FE. Yeah, so the older versions of the installer had an issue where once you went through the partitioning wizard, you would basically confirm that, and then it would throw a nasty looking error with a scheme stack trace in the next screen and say that it can't get the UUID of a particular partition. And I was scratching my head on that, like, why is this happening? And eventually it turned out that for some reason the Guix installer was looking at the boot FE partition on the USB stick I was using for installation, and it wasn't able to get the UUID for that. So Matthew was able to figure that out based on the information I was reporting, and whipped up a fix to make it so that the installer does a better job of ignoring the installation media whenever going through the partitioning steps. So that isn't a problem anymore, thankfully, and it should be pretty smooth from that perspective. But that doesn't mean there won't be other problems that people run into. And I'm perfectly happy to be the place where people try to report that stuff. And I might forward you along to the Guix maintainers, because they're the ones who know the best how all that stuff works. If you look at the code for the installer, it's definitely non-trivial code. So it's cool code. It's very cool, but it's non-trivial. So it's hard for a person to go and diagnose the problem themselves a lot of times. I spent a lot of time Sunday a couple weeks ago trying to figure this out myself, and made some progress, but didn't uncover the underlying issue. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, thanks Garjola for pulling that back. So yeah, Benoit was correct on his assumption that I was on nasty jet lag. Yeah, I'm recovering now, but it was not so good the last couple of days. So yeah, I need to look at what the actual error was to see what happened there. Tomas says, I think the main motivation for a custom language for Nix was performance, which was achieved by being lazily evaluated by default. I read something like this in the official source. That does make sense, actually. Lazy evaluation would be nice. Geeks can take a while to compile configurations because it actually does have to compile all the code. It's evaluating the entire configuration whenever you run it. So, yeah, Nix may be faster than Geeks because of that, but it also lacks certain power that Geeks has, I think, because of that as well. Let's see. Okay. I'm going to check my stream health real quick. Okay. I was concerned that the stream might suffer a little bit from bandwidth issues, but we seem to be doing well. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about is the Emacs Geeks package, which I mentioned before. So this is a package that you can install. In fact, I should probably write this down. Install with Geeks, install Emacs-Geeks. And it's basically a user interface. So a lot of people are sort of surprised. Like maybe you don't even realize it at first, but then you start to think, oh, is there a UI for Geeks so I can search for packages and get notified about updates, etc., like in other distributions? The answer is no. There is not a UI by default for Geeks. I think someone is working on a graphical interface for Geeks for searching for packages and all the things you would normally do, but it doesn't exist today. However, there is an Emacs package that provides this functionality and also a lot of powerful behavior that if you're an Emacs user, this is basically the best way to interface with Geeks aside from just using the shell. So I'm going to tell you about a few of the commands that come with this package so you can just sort of see what they're capable of and then see how you might try to use them in your own configuration and your own Emacs setup. So first of all, Geeks packages by name. This is a very helpful command which gives you a completion list of all the Geeks packages, which enables you to filter them very easily if you use a completion system like Helm or Ivy or Vertigo or Selectrum, etc. So let me run this really quickly. So Geeks packages by name. And this is going to start up the Geeks REPL in the background, and then it's going to give me a completion list here. So if I start typing Emacs dash, we get to see all the list of packages that have Emacs in it. I can also type EX to get EXWM, EXWMX. I think that's the package from Tumashu we were talking about before, EXWMX. Another one called EXWMEdit. Type Vertigo to see Vertigo there. So it gives you a very easy way to look for packages in Geeks. This is much faster, in my opinion, than using Geeks search on the command line because you get to use the power of your completion engine to take care of this for you. So I can see all the evil related packages by typing Emacs space EVI in my current completion setup. Obviously you need to have Vertigo and order list installed for this to work, but it also would work for Ivy, I think. So very, very useful thing to have. Now, if I wanted to get information about one of these packages, I can press enter and it gives me a panel that shows up or a buffer that shows up with the name of the package, the current version, the short description, the long description, and also it gives me the ability to even install the package from here. So if I were to click enter on this install, it would install it into the user level Geeks profile, the default user profile. And if you're managing your packages using that profile, then this is a very easy way to go check out packages and install them. There's also other things you can look at here, like you can try to run a build for the package. You can look at the build log for the package, look at the dependency graph, the size of the package. You can also find the source for the package, which is very useful. Sorry, that's the place where the package is originally cloned from when it gets built. But the source for the package is actually useful to have here. So it gives you a link to the Geeks source where this package is defined. If you press enter on this link, it will pop up the actual package definition for Emacs Evil org. and then you can take a look at how this package definition is defined. And when you start getting used to using Geeks, and you want to start tweaking package configs, or maybe you want to package something yourself, this can be a very easy way to learn how to package something by looking at a similar package. So for instance, if you want to learn how to package up an Emacs package, you can go find the package definition in Geeks for any Emacs package, typically something that's more simple, like an easier package. And then you can see all of the information here that's encoded in Scheme for describing this package definition. And it's a very good way to learn the Geeks code base, just to start from this point of looking at package defs and then kind of navigating around. If you can tell here, this file is very big. This is the Emacs XYZ file, which is kind of a dumping ground for Emacs packages. And a lot of the extra packages you would want to use in Emacs are in this file. So if I were to search for -evil, there's a lot of packages evil related in here, as among other things. There's many other things in here as well. So that's one nice thing that you can do with this Geeks package listing is get the details of a Geeks package and then look for the source location of that package. Now, one thing also that's interesting to point out here is that when I click enter on that, the actual path, if you look down in the echo area, it says that it's in the GNU store, and it's in a path called the Geeks modules path, if you look at that. And it basically builds a load path, kind of this hybrid load path for all of the channels that you have installed. So if you pull up DRED here and pop back a couple directories, you can see current share Guile site 3.0. You can see all of the channels I have installed. I have the flat channel, I have the channel X channel installed, I have non-Geeks, non-GNU. So you can sort of see how Geeks starts pulling together all these channels into an actual set of Scheme libraries that things get pulled into. Then once you start understanding this, you start to see exactly how Geeks is laid out. You're basically just building a set of modules that all these packages and services are defined in, and then you use Scheme code to pull these things out of the packages or out of the modules, and then manipulate them in actual code. So just a little bit of a kind of a behind the scenes look there, but yeah, you definitely would not try to edit the packages here because it's in the GNU store, which means it's read-only files. And you can see that here with the lock icon on this file. If you wanted to actually manipulate the packages, you would want to clone the Geeks Git repo and then manipulate it there. And that would also require that you change your channels file to point to that local file path instead of the default Savannah Git repository. That's another thing we'll cover in another video, basically how do you do basic package hacking in Geeks, but that's sort of out of scope right now. Garjola says, I think Geeks Emacs assumes that you're using Emacs from Geeks. Yes, that's true. Definitely you want to be doing that. So let's see, what was the next thing I wanted to show on that? I'll do a full video on the Geeks interface in Emacs at some point, but I just wanted to point this out in case it was useful to people in their early getting started steps. So there's also the ability to list the installed packages you have both in your main user profile and in the system level profile. We can look at the Geeks installed user packages command, and it will give you a list of all the things, or it gives me a list of all the packages I have installed. So these are the things that I was lazy enough to install using using Geeks install and not install them with a profile. So you'll see a lot of stuff in here that's sort of just one-off package installs that I did not yet put into a profile. But it's nice to have this listing because you can see the packages you have installed, the versions of all of them, and just like sort of a synopsis of the individual packages. So there's also bindings here that you can use. If we look at describe bindings, we should be able to see that there are Geeks package bindings for certain things, like latest build log, I think that probably is. What else is in here? List size. Which one is that? Yeah, it's probably the same stuff again, but a lot of this you can, I think if we press G here, we might see some things. So if I go press G, which key will tell me what the G keys are. List latest builds, output list edit, not sure what that's about. Output apply manifest. There's some various bindings that are in this view already, which could be useful, so you should definitely look into that. Let's see. Same thing for system packages. You can look at the installed system packages as well. So you'll see the things that are installed at the system level, and that's a different list of things because that's really depends on what the system configuration has in it. There's also a command called Geeks Emacs Autoload Packages. So this is a very useful command to know about if you install a new Emacs package through Geeks while you're using Emacs. That sort of reloads all of the autoloads for packages so that you can get access to the new Emacs package that you just installed using Geeks. Otherwise, you probably won't get it because it needs to reevaluate the current state of the profile to find the new package. So if you use Geeks install to install an Emacs package, or if you reinstall your Emacs manifest, you definitely want to run the Geeks Emacs Autoload Packages command, and then you'll see a bunch of output in the echo area, basically where it's reloading all the autoloads for the packages that are a part of your profile. So that could be useful. Tomas says, you had Nix installed as a system package. Yes, there is a Nix service that you can install in Geeks, which makes it possible for you to install Nix packages alongside your Geeks packages. And that's something that I highly recommend if you are migrating over from Nix and you have certain packages that you need from there, or if there's packages that exist in Nix that don't exist yet in Geeks, you can use the Nix service to enable you to use the Nix command line interface to install those packages for your user profile in Nix. I do that for a few things like the .NET SDK and PowerShell, just things that I need very rarely but aren't available in Geeks. Well, they weren't available in Geeks before. I think .NET recently got added to the non-Geeks repo. Garjola says, are there weekly or nightly Emacs builds from master for Geeks? There is a package called Emacs Next. Let's use this fancy interface to pull that up. Emacs-Next. And this basically is tracking master. So if I go look at the package definition for this, what it does is it inherits from the base Emacs package, but then it uses a more recent commit of Emacs. I don't exactly know how recent this commit is, but it isn't the most recent commit. There is a way to use the most recent commit, but that's sort of out of scope right now to describe. But you can change the commit that a particular package build uses if you want to. However, this does not turn on native comp. So if you want to use Emacs native comp, you need to use the Flat Watson Geeks channel to get that package. So, but this will give you Emacs 28 and probably a very recent commit. I don't know. It really just depends on who updates this and how frequently they update it. But it wouldn't be weekly or nightly unless someone had automated the update of this package. So let's see. I'll go back to my notes here. Geeks Generations. So if you watched I think it was the Everyday Package Management video that I did. Geeks Generations are basically the different instances of the set of packages that you have installed. So let's say you have 5 packages installed and you then use Geeks Install to install another package. What you do there is actually create a new generation for your user level profile, and both of those still exist. So for whatever reason your new package install causes a problem for you, you can roll back to the previous set of packages you had installed by rolling back to the previous generation. And you can use the Geeks Generations command to list all of the generations for a particular profile. By default, it's pulling my per user profile. You can see that there's a bunch of different generations here with all of the dates at which those generations were created and how many packages were installed in those. You can also go look at the folder where the profile is to go inspect the files, like let's say etc profile, which is a pretty important file for Geeks instead of in your individual profiles. Whoops, let's see, I'll kill that. And there's also commands that you can do here, like if you wanted to roll back to another profile, I think, let's see, sorry, if you want to roll back to a previous generation, Geeks generation. You can even delete generations here, which can be pretty useful if you want to free up space, I think. Yeah, Geeks generation list set current. So if you put your cursor on one of these lines and press C, it will roll back to that particular generation, I think. I don't know if I do this, if it's going to cause problems for me right now, so I don't really want to try it. But it's an easy way to roll back the generation for a profile if you need to for some reason. So very useful for the more, I guess, advanced use cases of Geeks. Once you start to understand how things work, you can use this UI to manage generations more easily. I think it's also possible to get generations for other profiles you have installed. So if you use multiple manifests, you may want to see the information for the profile for that manifest. You can use the Geeks Profiles command to show the list of profiles that you have installed. You can see that I have a few here from the different manifests that I install. So if I go to, let's go to the music profile. Actually, no, let's back out of that. I think I should be able to get the Geeks generations from here. Let's see, that's not the right one. I'm trying to figure out which command will do it for this. In fact, let's check the binding. So G, doesn't show up there. Let's see, describe bindings. So if I look for generations, Geeks profile list show generations, I think it's A. So let me check here on the music entry. I'm going to press A. Cool. So it does show you the list of generations for that profile. So if you want to find the generation list for a particular profile, you can run the Geeks Profiles command to list all of your profiles, both at the system level and at your user level. You can see that here. If I go to the system profile and press A, it will tell me the set of profiles for the system, which is also kind of cool because you can see which versions of Linux I had installed on those individual profiles, which can be useful if you needed to keep track of that. So a very, very useful interface for a variety of things that you want to do with Geeks, and I highly recommend taking a look at it and learning how you can use it. Frankly, I don't use it as much as I should. I guess the good thing is I don't have to use it for a lot of these things. I don't really switch generations very often, and the way that I manage profiles is pretty straightforward. So it hasn't been something that was needed for me. However, it's awesome to have that level of detail for all of the sort of stuff you have installed in Geeks. So that was it for that package. Like I said, I'll do a more in-depth video at some point in the future because, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff that it does, and it really deserves its own focus, I think. Amd says, how to add custom symbol on terminal. You mean like the ones I have here? You basically just need to customize your prompt function. I'm using eShell, so I have a custom prompt function in eShell that has that character in it. It's really just a matter of setting that the way you need it. Operation 69 says, really love this live stream. Thanks, I appreciate that. All right, so system tweaks. This is a variety of things that I've had to figure out how to do over time that I wanted to tell you about in case you also have the same questions. I'm going to cover a lot of this stuff probably in more detail in a future video, but I'm just going to show you a few things right now for my own system configuration, just in case you wanted to figure out how to do these things. And I would say that some of these techniques are a little advanced for the first week of using Geeks, but I want to point them out in case you run into these problems and then you want to find a way to do them. You could basically just copy what I'm doing in my own system configuration. Garzola says, what's the usefulness of profiles? For instance, your music profile. The benefit of that is that if I have a machine that I don't want to install music software on, like music creation software, then I can just not install that profile on that machine. So having separate profiles for separate types of software makes it so that on my work computer, I don't put video editing software or music production software on there. I just have, my Emacs packages and my desktop packages and maybe a separate profile for work. So it basically just gives you the ability to separate the sets of packages for different purposes and then install them only when needed. It also gives you the ability to update lists of packages independently. So like if you want to install Ungoogle Chromium or Firefox and you don't want them to be rebuilt all the time when you update them, you can just put them in a separate profile and just don't update that profile until you are ready to deal with it being rebuilt, or if there's a substitute available for those. So there's a few reasons, and I'm going to cover that in another video because there's a whole sort of technique around doing that. So one thing I also wanted to point out is that one problem that you are probably going to run into while editing your system configuration file is that you're going to need to make sure to import the right modules that contain the symbols that you're using in the configuration snippets that you copy. So when you try to install that configuration, the Geeks compiler basically will do a pretty good job of telling you which modules that you're missing. And And that can sort of show you the way to fixing that. But in general, if you are copying things from my configuration and it's complaining about missing modules, you might want to go look at the module list that I have imported inside of my system config, and use that as a basis for what you copy. So basically, this list here is the list of modules I'm importing in my system configuration. And a lot of these are necessary because of things that I'm using in the config itself, because we're writing actual code here. This is an actual scheme source file. And if you're referring to package names that are defined in a particular Geeks module, you have to import that module to have access to the symbol for that package. Tomas says, can you activate multiple profiles at once? Yes, that's what I do. And it's something that would be nice if Geeks made it easy to do by default. But it's sort of a more advanced use case, and it's something I'm going to show people how to do. In fact, I'm going to make my own Geeks package, hopefully, to simplify this whole process. But yeah, it's something that you basically have to add some extra functionality of your own to Geeks to make it happen. So Elias says, usually through a shell script, just loop through your profiles and source each one. Yeah, that's basically what I'm doing, is I just have shell scripts that are helping me manage the profiles that I have installed. So the two main profiles I have are my Emacs profile, which has Emacs and all the packages that I use, and also the desktop profile, which has all the packages for my desktop environment. So all my graphical programs, stuff like Polybar, any other font configurations that I need, etc. So back to this list. Elias, thank you. So controlling screen brightness. This is one thing that you're probably going to run into if you try to use a program like Brightness Control to control your screen brightness. A lot of people use that program or programs like it if you have a more minimal desktop environment. You need to do some extra work. At least you had to in the past. I don't know if that's changed in recent days, but it's something that I still have in my configuration because I think it is necessary. Basically, you have to add an extra Udev rule to make it possible for your user account to go and change the brightness setting. And I don't want to go into detail explaining what Udev is, but it's basically the way that devices are exposed in Linux. And you have to add a specific rule to say that users of a certain group can change the brightness for that specific device. So there's two things that you need to do here. One is to define the Udev rule. Let's see if I can pull this up in a Qt browser, if it lets me. Okay, cool. So right here is something from my own configuration where in Scheme, I'm defining a variable called backlight Udev rule, which contains some code that defines this Udev rule. This is something that I basically copied from a message on the Geeks, one of the Geeks mailing lists. So this is not necessarily something that I can explain to you in depth how it works, but this definitely works for me in my configuration. So we're basically just defining a rule for the device, the backlight device, effectively, and saying that users, let's see, yeah, users in the video group can then change the backlight, which also implies that you need to make sure that your user that you create with your Geeks system config is added to the video group. So I think that might be the case by default, but if not, in your user account config, you need to make sure that the video group is added to the supplementary groups list. And you can see how I do that here in my config. Also, you need to modify the Udev service configuration. And this is one of these things that I mentioned before, which is more advanced configuration patterns that you won't necessarily understand at first. But if you keep in mind that Geeks configurations are actually code, it makes it a little bit easier to understand what's happening. So right here, I'm defining my own list of desktop services. So by default, there is a variable called %sign desktop services. Let me try to increase the font size a little bit on this. And what I'm doing here is modifying the original desktop services list to create my own variable called my desktop services. I'm using the modify services function, which provides some behavior that makes it easier to change the configurations for different service types that are already a part of this desktop services list. And I have a few services I'm modifying here, one of them being the Udev service type. So when you say Udev service type here, the next thing you do is pass in a function that accepts the configuration for that service. And then you can write the Udev configuration again, inheriting the previous config, but then changing the rules list. So this seems overkill. This seems like it's, it's something that you shouldn't have to do, which in some ways I agree. And maybe it's something that can be added to the default desktop services configuration if it's not already. Like I said, I don't know if it's already there. However, it does show you how you can take the default desktop services configuration and basically change anything about it using code. And in this case, we're basically adding this backlight Udev rule to the existing Udev configuration rules for the previous configuration that we're basically inheriting and overwriting in this case. So whenever you start looking into how to manipulate the settings of services, this is the pattern you're going to see a lot. You're going to see modify services. You're going to pass in an existing list of services and then use this sort of pattern to say which service type you're modifying and then giving the new configuration that you're going to replace the old one with. And then I think that's it for that particular configuration example. So I showed one of the harder ones first, which is probably not the greatest thing to do, but I just wanted to sort of point that out because backlight is going to be something that you're going to probably run into as a problem. Juanito says, where do you load your profiles? I try to source it on .x profile, but it doesn't work. I can load the profiles from bash profile, but then the packages aren't available on app menus. Yeah, so I use my .profile file for that, but I also have full control over how my window manager starts up because I'm using my X session file. For other window managers, I'm not exactly sure what the best place is for that, but what Elias says is true. You would have to add the profile paths to your XDG data DIRs so that the applications inside of those profiles will show up in your applications list. So Christoph says, backlight control works with no additional configuration on my new Geeks install with GNOME desktop. That may be the case with GNOME, but it's definitely not the case with EXWM or other more minimal window managers. I think that the GNOME configuration may set up things, and it also may manipulate the backlight in a different way than what brightness control does. So it doesn't need the same configuration. I mean, if you want to have the smoothest out-of-the-box experience with Geeks, I think that using the GNOME desktop environment is the way to do that. But a lot of us are probably not going to be using GNOME because we want to do other things with our desktop. So let's see. Elias says, sourcing exposes apps to the CLI, but not to the GUI, which relies on XDG stuff. Yeah, these XDG data variables are very important for the desktop specification, the whatever it's called, the Linux desktop specification. You have to have things set up in particular environment variables for them to be visible to programs that expect the desktop environment to follow that specification. So listing applications is one of those things. There's other stuff like fonts and icons. You'll have to make sure that those things are set up correctly. In fact, if you look at my .profile, is it the right one? Yeah, my .profile file. Yeah, I have a few of these being added. I'm doing it myself basically. So you can see here, I make applications and other profiles visible to the launcher. I'm setting XDG data DIRs with the various paths to those profiles. Now, obviously, I could just roll this into one variable if I wanted to, but I just had them separate here so it's easy to add new ones if I wanted. So another thing is, excuse me, if you use Flatpak, you're going to have to do the same thing. You're going to have to add the share path of Flatpak to your XDG data DIRs so that the Flatpak apps show up in your applications list. So this is just another example of how using Geeks sometimes requires you to do extra work that you don't have to do in other distributions, because depending on how you use Geeks, you have to sort of figure out a little bit more about how Linux works. Tomas says these are often called XDG specifications as an acronym for the cross-desktop group. Yeah, thanks for that. Alexander says, have you heard of the Geeks Home project? With this tool, you can manage config of your programs in a Geeks way. Yeah, I'm keeping an eye on that. It seems to be that the new iteration of that, written by Andrew Tropin, seems to be progressing to a point where they're going to merge that into Geeks to have it as a real feature of Geeks. Once that happens, I'll definitely take a closer look and see if I can use it in my own, the way that I do my configuration. As it stands, I'm not entirely certain of the value for me. I see that there is definitely value of managing your home folder that way, but I have a particular way that I like to manage mine. And I'm not certain how I would do the things that I do currently with Geeks Home. Now, that said, I do want to investigate it to figure out if it does provide some added benefits to me, because I would be very interested to find out about that. But yeah, I haven't really tried to use it yet. I know that people really like Nix Home Manager, I think they call it, over on Nix OS. So people have been looking for the same type of functionality in Geeks for a while, and we're finally going to get it. It's just a matter of learning it and figuring out how to apply it. All right, so what else? Enabling Bluetooth. So I don't think Bluetooth is enabled by default if you don't use GNOME out of the box. So if you have your own custom configuration or you're using a different desktop environment, you may need to enable Bluetooth yourself, which requires a few steps. First of all, you need to enable the Bluetooth service. So if you go to the list of services that I have configured inside of my system configuration, I'm adding Bluetooth service as one of those. Like I said, this could be something that gets added by default now, but I haven't checked in a while. So if it is added by default, then this is unnecessary. However, I never get a complaint saying that I've added it twice. So it must mean that I'm doing something right here. So adding this service is one thing that's needed. Another thing that's needed is to add yourself to the LP group, which gives you the ability to control Bluetooth devices. Now, I think that traditionally LP was for printers. And I think maybe one of the first places printers were used, Bluetooth was used in Linux was for printers. So maybe that's why there's this convention of using the LP group for Bluetooth. Maybe somebody else knows the real reason for that. But I think that you do need to be added to the LP group so that you can control Bluetooth devices, like controlling scanning and pairing with new devices, etc. So make sure to do that step. You also want to make sure to install BlueZ and BlueZ ALSA if you want to have like Bluetooth headphones, so that you can use that together with Pulse Audio to use the A2DP audio profile to have high quality audio streams that come through Pulse Audio whenever you have the headphones connected. So you definitely need these three packages here as well whenever you try to set up Bluetooth. Elias says, from the benefit for Geeks Home will be running user services. Yeah, I already do that with Shepherd. I just run my own Shepherd daemon in my user account. However, it would be nice if I could, not have to set that up manually and let Geeks Home take care of that for me. So I'm certainly interested in trying that out, especially if you can use the same service definitions that already exist inside of Geeks. So there's already a service definition for SyncThing. I've written my own, but it would be nice if I could use the built-in SyncThing service. Obviously, I probably could do that right now, even with my own user-level configure Shepherd daemon. But being able to roll that into using Geeks Home and having everything be managed in a more sort of standard way would be nice, I think. All right, so that was everything for Bluetooth. There's also using lib input for better touchpad support. So if you're using Geeks on a laptop, there's a better driver. Thanks, Amos, for that. So there's a better driver for touchpads called lib input than the one that is used by default in Geeks. And it will allow you to configure things like, tap to click, two-finger right-click, tapping, drag, a lot of that stuff that you see in this configuration block right here. So what I'm doing here is defining a variable called xorg libinput_config, and I'm putting basically the raw config that you would use in your xorg configuration for the lib input driver. And then I customize the xorg configuration. And the way that I do this is going to be different than the way that you might do it with other configurations, because instead of using GDM as my login manager, I'm using Slim instead. And because of that, I can configure the xorg configuration here. However, it may be different to configure that for GDM or anything else you might be using. So you have to look to see where the xorg configuration can be overridden for your login manager. But once you do that, you can set the xorg configuration to use the extra config parameter, which basically allows you to just pass in an arbitrary string of configuration to use for your xorg config. So doing that allows me to use this separate driver that has better support for the things that I want to do with my touchpad, and it's been a lot better for me. So definitely try it out if you don't like the way that your touchpad feels in Geeks. I think you also need to install another package for this. Let's see, where was it? Yeah, the xf86 input lib input package. So you're definitely going to need that as well if you want to use this, just to make sure that it's available. And then lastly, a lot of people, when they write bash scripts, instead of using like /bin/node, if you're writing like a bash script that calls into Node.js, they'll use something called user bin env, which is like a proxy command almost to run a command from inside your environment. And this is really important on Geeks, especially because you often don't see commands like Node.js or Python or whatever get installed directly into the /bin folder or the /user bin folder. They're going to be installed in a profile, and it's going to show up in a different place. So you actually do need to use user bin env in your scripts to invoke the right interpreter for that script. Now, this isn't set up by default in Geeks. The user bin env path does not exist, but you can set it up by using the extra special file service. So if I load up the config for that, this is actually probably the easiest config that we've looked at so far. You basically just add this service to your service list. Whoa, that's the wrong link. It's actually right here, extra special file, and I'm gonna copy this link so I can paste it back. But we say there's an extra special file called /user/bin/env, and what we're doing is we're appending the core utils package path. So the path where core utils is installed. And core utils is the package that contains this env command. We're appending the path to that package to the /bin/env command that is included with that package. And what this is doing is creating this user bin env file as a symbolic link to this path. So you're basically just setting up this user bin env to point to whatever core utils you have installed in your system profile. And that enables your scripts to then use user bin env to select the right interpreter in a more system agnostic way, which is important when you're trying to write a script that works on multiple distributions. So you want the script to run on Geeks, you want it to run on Debian, you want it to run on whatever else. You definitely want to set this up so that you can write scripts like that. Otherwise, you're going to have to encode the entire GNU store path to the interpreter in your script, and then that makes it immediately not portable to other systems, and even not portable to the next time you install your system config, you update your system config, because now you're going to have a different store path for the interpreter that you're using. So you should definitely add this to your configuration no matter what you do, because eventually you're going to try to run a script that needs it. Let me make sure that I have the right path here in this. Yeah, I think I don't have it. So I'm going to repaste this link that I just copied over. Yeah, okay. Cool. So another thing that you might want to do if you have a laptop or a desktop that has NVIDIA a graphics chipset installed, it is possible to install NVIDIA drivers. So a member of the System Connector community, Demis Balak, who goes by MinicN, wrote up some instructions on the System Connector's wiki explaining how you can install and use the NVIDIA drivers from the non-Geeks repo. So within the last 6 months, someone created a package to set up the proprietary NVIDIA drivers in Geeks. And you can only find it on that non-Geeks repo because obviously they're proprietary drivers. This walkthrough will tell you how you should set up your system configuration to make use of that package. And I haven't tried this myself yet, but I know that Demis has gotten this to work, and he had to go through a lot of trouble basically to figure this out. But he's very helpfully put together this set of instructions for anybody who wants to try to set that up on their own machine. So give this a shot, and if you run into any trouble with it, come tell us about it on the System Connector's IRC or Discord, and we'll see about trying to get the instructions updated to take into account whatever is necessary to fix it for you. I haven't seen anybody try to set up AMD drivers yet, but if you do have experience setting up AMD graphics drivers in Geeks, I would love to have some information about that added to the wiki. So come find us, or just go to wiki.systemconnectors.cc, and I think we have some information about contributing here. So definitely feel free to come and try to contribute that if you want to. Excuse me. I'm starting to get scratchy voice here, if you can't tell already. Elias says, one trick I do is add my channels SCM to etc. Geeks channels.scm using the extra special file service makes it so all my users and systems have the same channels. That's a good idea, actually. Let's see. Yeah, I like that idea. I haven't had the a reason to do that yet. However, I do have a project in mind where this will be very useful. So I think that I'll follow your recommendation there. I think it's a really good idea. So let's see. The next thing is I just wanted to point out that the Geeks Manual. I mean, this should be obvious, I guess, but the Geeks Manual has a lot of really helpful information on setting up various services that you might want to use. It doesn't cover every service that is available in Geeks. There's some things I think that aren't covered at all or not very well. But if you want to look into how to set up certain things like, I don't know, sync services or mail services or anything else that we've covered so far, you can check out the services section of the GNU Guix manual. And it will tell you about all the types of services that are available, which might be useful for figuring out, what you can use in Geeks. And then it will tell you how to configure all of them. So like database services, sound services, desktop services, web services, there's chat services, I think. Yeah, messaging services. There's a lot of stuff here. So definitely go take a look through this and see if there's anything that might be interesting to you that you might want to use in Geeks. And then it should tell you how to set things up. There's a lot of other sections in here as well that are helpful in figuring out how to do certain things, like using the package manager. There's a lot of configuration information here. Doing development using Geeks environment. The programming interface, which is helpful if you want to write your own package or your own service definition, kind of understanding how all this works. Also, the various commands for Geeks. There's a lot of documentation on how to use those here. So some of the things that are sort of less commonly used, like let's say Geeks graph. If you want to go check out what that actually means, you can click on the link there to jump to that section, and it will tell you what Geeks graph does, which basically seems like it renders graphs to show you the dependency graph for packages, which can be pretty useful for understanding the relationships between the packages that you install. A whole section on system configuration, which could be useful, especially if you want to use something like a custom file system like BTRFS. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff here. I definitely recommend scanning over the manual to see if there's anything there that is interesting. Also, the single page manual that I'm looking at right now can be useful for quickly figuring out if something is supported by Geeks. Like let's say SyncThing. I searched for that and I found that there is a service for SyncThing that you can set up to run the SyncThing peer-to-peer syncing application as a Geeks service. So I was able to find that and then figure out how to configure it pretty easily. So if you're looking for a particular type of service or program, you might just go here and search the full documentation file or full manual, basically, to find things that you're interested in. Elias says that they've set up the Amd drivers. Yeah, if you can help come up with some steps for that for other people, that'd be really helpful because one aspect of using Geeks as a daily driver Linux distribution is using the correct drivers for your graphics card if you want to have, if you want to play games or if you want to do anything that's more graphically intensive. Yeah, so it is sort of what I expected. Basically what Elias says is that the AMD drivers are in the kernel, so you just need to add the AMD firmware and activate the AMD GPU kernel module. You don't have to go through the same hassle as the NVIDIA drivers. This is part of the reason why the next time I build a desktop machine, I'm going to use an AMD card instead of NVIDIA, because NVIDIA has been nothing but a headache for Linux users for years, and I'm kind of sick of it, to be honest. All right, the next useful thing to know about Geeks is that there are some really helpful mailing lists and IRC channels for Geeks. You can find all of the mailing lists for Geeks at the Savannah website. I'll pull that up really quickly so you can see it. There are a lot of lists here, but the ones that are the most useful, in my opinion, are the Help Geeks user support mailing list, which is best for people who are just starting out with Geeks and you're trying to figure out how to do a certain thing. You can send an email there to get helped. There's also Geeks Devel, which is the sort of development discussion about Geeks. If you want to learn more about sort of what's happening in Geeks development or get a read on what new features are coming in Geeks, You can check out that alias and then see what people are talking about there. You can also take a look at the Geeks Patches mailing list, which is where people send contributions to Geeks, like new packages or maybe changes to the service configurations or changes to the installer. All those things are typically sent as packages. Now, not every change that happens in Geeks goes to this list. The people who have the ability to make commits directly to the Geeks repository often will make those commits without sending patches. That's because they are trusted to do that. But you'll see a lot of activity on Geeks patches because there are a lot of people who are contributing to Geeks who are not committers in Geeks. So you can keep an eye on that list to see how certain packages are being updated or added over time if you want to. There's also Info Geeks if you want announcements about about Geeks updates. It's not very frequently updated, so if you just want some high-level info about Geeks, that's a good place to start. There's one place for bug reports for Geeks. If you are really wanting to get involved with the development of Geeks and maybe help fix some bugs, definitely sign up for that one if you are interested in hearing about all the user complaints that are coming through. It can be useful to be aware of things that you need to deal with on your computer on newer Geeks revisions as well, so it can be helpful for certain things. Lastly, there is the irc.libra chat server that, we have the System Cutter's channel there, but there's also the Geeks and non-Geeks channels there where in the Geeks channel, the maintainers of Geeks largely are there talking to people, answering questions. So if you want to learn more about the internals or the esoteric knowledge about Geeks, or just get general help, you can definitely go there to ask people things. However, don't go and ask questions about proprietary drivers or software, because they have a sort of not allowed policy, mainly because Geeks itself is a free software it follows the free software distribution guidelines, and I think they are not supposed to advocate or enable necessarily the use of proprietary components. But if you go to the non-Geeks channel, you can ask questions about that there, because typically the first place you look for proprietary stuff is the non-Geeks channel. So the IRC channel, the corresponding IRC channel, is a good place to go ask questions about the full Linux kernel or NVIDIA drivers or anything else that you need to install that doesn't fall under the free software aspect of Geeks. So lastly, what else? Is there anything else that you're wondering after installing Geeks? So I'm curious to hear about the experiences of people who have tried to install Geeks this week or maybe in the past, and things you've had trouble with. I may not know all the answers to these things, but there's clearly people here in the chat who do know some stuff. So between all of us, maybe we can point you in the right direction. It's also useful for me to know what trouble you run into so that I can come up with steps or videos that can help you to get through these problems over time. Also, it's very useful for people to come up with ideas or things to write about on the System Crafters wiki. So if you have anything in particular that you're thinking about, please feel free to ask it in the chat right now. All right, let me see how we're doing here. Okay. Oh. Anybody having trouble with the stream video quality right now? Let's see what's going on in the background. OBS is eating a lot. Probably Firefox as well. Let me actually go and pause this thing. I think this is probably part of the problem. So Elias says, I think the biggest thing is learning about non-Geeks. Most systems need proprietary drivers. Yeah, if you're going to install Geeks on a modern laptop or even a modern desktop machine, you're more than likely you're going to need to have proprietary firmware blobs enabled inside of your Linux kernel for it to work correctly. And that's the main reason why I made that custom Geeks installer image, because I wanted it to make it really easy for someone who needs the full driver set to pull an ISO that already has it installed. Because whenever I had to learn how to set up non-Geeks before, it was kind of a headache to do it. It's not non-Geeks' fault. It's just it makes the actual ISO-based installation process a lot harder if you need to use drivers for Wi-Fi. If you have a laptop that doesn't have an Ethernet jack, you definitely have to use the non-Geeks kernel to even get access to the internet to complete the installation phase. So it is definitely necessary with modern computers for sure. Elias says, for instance, AMD systems don't work with Linux Libre. Yeah, that's good to know. I didn't know that, but it doesn't really surprise me since you do need AMD's firmware for those components. So yeah, that is definitely the biggest hurdle, and I'm trying to smooth that out for people. I think I did a pretty good job of it with the video on Monday, because you don't have to compile the kernel, you don't have to set up the non-geeks channel yourself. It's already baked into the image to start with. There's only just a little bit of extra manual steps at the end. However, I think, excuse me, I think that if I were to poke around with the installer code a little bit more, I might be able to set it up so that the whole end-to-end graphical installation process can use the full Linux kernel, and you won't have to do that last Geeks Time Machine step that I was doing in the video. So I think this situation can be improved a lot for people who need to use the full Linux kernel, and I would like to try to do that over time. If anybody's interested in helping with that as well, definitely check out the Geeks installer repo, because that's where I'm working on all of that. It's under github.com/systemcrafters/geeks-installer. And all it is really is the installer.scm configuration, which is inherits from the main installation OS configuration, and then just changes the kernel and the firmware being used. Also adds some extra kernel arguments to help with a couple problems that I've hit over time. And then it adds a service that copies over the channels.scm file, which maybe I could even use the extra special file process that Elias was talking about to do this in a simpler way. But I'm basically copying the channel file that was used to generate this image over to the installation image, so that the same pinned channel list can be used when installing Geeks onto the target machine. That is the reason we're able to avoid compiling the Linux kernel during installation. I also added a couple extra packages that are useful, like Stow, Vim, and Emacs without the X toolkit. So that, and then the workflow for building this is also pretty simple. So it's really just a matter of these two things together that causes the images to be produced and then added to the repository as releases. And these get updated automatically like every 7 days, I think. So we get new builds. It tells you what channels that were used to build the image, and then you get the ISO file at the end of it. So I think this is going to be a useful thing for people who need that full Linux kernel. So I'm hoping people will help contribute to this a little bit and make it better over time. Bruno Ribas says, to avoid non-geeks, you may use USB tethering via Bluetooth from some Android phone. Via USB. Yeah, that is definitely possible. There's various different ways to do it. But yeah, the way that I've done it with the non-geeks kernel, at least it is a process that isn't too hard to follow now. But if you could do it in a way where you don't need to use a customized kernel, then it is even easier, because you don't need to. You can just use the off-the-shelf image, the Geeks installer image that comes from the Geeks website to do that. And dial up over RS-232. Yeah, that would be interesting, Benoit. So let's see. Luis says, how can I configure session entries for GDM? The path it looks is read-only. Yes. If you want to add session entries, the way that you would do that is to create a Geeks package that configures the file and puts it in the right place for that. Let's see. I wonder if one of the current package. Let's see. What about? Whoops. Let's see. I'm trying to think about which package we could look at for that. Maybe i3. How about that? So let's look at. One thing about using the key bindings for this Geeks list packages command, I think is what it's called. Geeks, come on. Geeks packages by name. The Geeks packages by name command is that if you're in a buffer, it tries to use thing at point or even symbol at point to try to figure out the thing under your cursor, and sometimes it would give you this weird string P error when you try to run it. So if you ever see a weird string P error, you don't necessarily need to you need to move to a word in the buffer that is a real word and not just like some empty space in the buffer. So let's look for, now I lost my train of thought. i3. i3WM, We'll look at the package configuration for that. Does it have the desktop file here? Yes. So it is setting up the desktop files into share sessions i3 desktop. And I don't think it's doing anything. Let's see, patch session file. Standard phases. I wonder where the patch session file is defined. Oh no, sorry. That's the name of this new phase that's being added. So it's basically putting this file in the output path for the package, and I'm thinking that Geeks probably just figures that out and then adds this to the share path. So you would need to have a package that writes out a file to the package build output folders share/x session/something.desktop, and I think that Geeks should pick that up and make it available as a session entry. Now, obviously, that is a lot more complicated than just creating a .desktop file in the default folder for that. But this is the way that Geeks works. You can't actually edit these file paths directly because they're meant to be declaratively specified and applied in a repeatable way. So you can't just go edit files at your system level configuration directly. You're going to have to create a package or service configuration in your Geeks config that does that for you. Elea says, I once dreamed of creating a knowledge base called Wiki Geeks. Yeah, it's what we're trying to do basically at the System Captors Wiki to provide some information on, common usage patterns for Geeks, but it also does make sense that if people wanted to create a, Geeks specific one, that would also be very useful. Benoit says StartX would be much simpler. Unfortunately, using StartX on Geeks is not very simple. Apparently, it's not even. I think it requires some hacking configuration to even get that far. I know that John Su told me that he had submitted a patch to make it more possible to do that, but I don't think it ever got merged. So yeah, it would be nice if you could just use StartX, but I think it's not easy out of the box with Geeks. Benoit says, does GDM look at local share / sessions? I don't know if it does, but that would be a good thing to look into because usually the local share folder in your user path can be consulted for files like this. I know that with the Slim login manager, you can use a .x session file in your home folder and it will pick that up and log in directly to that. And that's what I use for launching EXWM with my own custom configuration. So if you want a way to have total control over your session config, definitely use the Slim desktop manager and then use a .x session file. Thanks, Isla. I appreciate that. So let's see. We're getting around to the end of the stream time now, I think. I think my lateness had me start the stream probably around an hour and 50 minutes ago. So I'll wait a couple more minutes to see if anyone else has questions, and then I'll start winding things down. Hopefully, though, what we covered today was useful to some of you who need a sort of like some tips that can get you unblocked on some of these things, because it is a little bit hard to figure out the right way to use Geeks when you're first just getting set up, especially if you have certain software that you're trying to use, like let's say i3 Window Manager. These things can be harder to do the same things that you would do in another distro, mainly because you have a lot more configuration that may need to be done at the system level. Plus, you also have to figure out the right packages to use. So hopefully some of this stuff was useful if you run into these specific problems. Also, if you have other problems you're running into with GNU Guix, please feel free to either add a comment to this video after the stream is done, or come talk to us in the IRC or Discord. The link to that is below in the description, I think. Also, if you just go to http://systemcrafters.chat, all the information is there as well. We can try to help you out with anything that you find, and I can try to use that information for future videos that we make to try to help with some of these issues. Benoit says, we need a Guile/console login manager that uses Xsession or Xinit. That would be kind of cool, I think. There was another one that I think Benoit, had shown us. I forgot what it's called, but I don't know if it would work for this purpose. But yeah, it would be cool to have a console login manager. However, I think that the login managers do a little bit of the Xorg configuration setup. So I don't know if you're going to lose some of the functionality that you get from the other login managers that are set up in Guix, because they do apply Xorg configuration. So we would have to look into that. If it was possible to have the console-based login manager apply Xorg config, then I think that would be great. What is this button? Is this a poll? Wow, we actually have the ability to add polls now. Let's try this. Let's try this. So let's see. Guy says, very interesting videos. I haven't thought about using Geeks. Do you have a video comparing it to NixOS? Still haven't moved from my current distro. I don't have one yet for comparing it to NixOS. Maybe I've made comparisons to NixOS in other Geeks videos, but never one focusing explicitly on that. I haven't used NixOS as a full system since probably 2013. So I don't really know what the state of the art is on that, so I wouldn't have all the latest information, but I'm definitely curious to hear what other people have learned if they've tried both the NixOS and the full Geek system to see what the differences would be and what the benefits are of one versus the other. I mean, obviously the biggest benefit of NixOS versus Geeks is the packages that are available and the service configurations that are available that are not yet there in Geeks, but that's something that will change over time, I think. Luis says there's a video from the Nix conference comparing the two. Yeah, I think I've seen that one too. Christoph says, you inspired me to switch to it last month. I'm working on moving over to EXWM now. Nice, that's really cool to hear. Let's see. It doesn't give me the full poll results. Okay, so 64% no, which doesn't surprise me, because, you know, it sort of is it's like jumping off the deep end of the pool a little bit, trying to do this. So I'll end this poll now. So let's see. NixOS language still sucks. Yeah, it's not ideal. I mean, it does a job, but I prefer Scheme. All right, I think I'm gonna shut things down here so that I can give the room back to my parents-in-law so they can sleep. We're in sort of a small house, and there's not a whole lot of space for me to spread out and have my whole setup set up in the right place. So I'm having to borrow a room for that right now. All right, before I go, I wanted to say thank you to. Wait a second, what's going on here? There we go. I want to say thank you to my sponsors. And yes, once again, I've not got the screen updated because I'm still waiting to have time to work on the script to pull these names down. But I actually do have time now since I'm on vacation to do that. So that's one of the main things I'm going to do in the next few weeks is to automate this screen so that I can make sure to thank the people who are currently sponsors, especially all the new sponsors who have joined in the last few weeks. So these people have decided to sponsor the work that I'm doing, making videos about GNU Guix, GNU Emacs, etc. And I'm very, very thankful to them for their support. It definitely makes it possible for me to continue doing this. It gives me the motivation and also the sort of the signal that I need to know that I'm doing the right thing here. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor of the channel, definitely check out the links I have below in the description. I'm on both GitHub sponsors and Patreon. There's also a link to PayPal and GitHub sponsors for one-time tips. I've got some cool ideas for how I want to change the sponsorship setup in the near future. I'm going to send out an email to sponsors pretty soon about this. So if you're curious about that, definitely become a sponsor so you get to see that. If you're not interested in becoming a sponsor, definitely you can help support the channel by clicking like on this video and any other videos that we post. It helps with the algorithm for whatever reason. And also definitely share the videos with other people who might be interested in learning more about GNU Guix and GNU Emacs, because the more people we have here chatting about these things, the more people that will have really cool things to share, like Elias today, who had a lot of really nice, useful things to share about Geeks. So I really appreciate you being here, Elias, to give your knowledge about things. So Gene says, that's not what vacation is for. Yeah, it is. It's to have more time to write code that is not work related. That's what I'm going to be doing anyway. Benoit says coding on the beach. I would do that, but I don't want to get sand in my keyboard. I think that would be kind of a bummer. But anyway, thank you all so much for being here today. I really appreciate the engagement and all of your feedback. And this week, we'll see when I get a video out. I really want to get this camera situation sorted out, but I think I'm definitely going to do the video on starting the new Mastering Git with Magit series to start showing off all the features of Magit and to show you how to use it for your day-to-day work. So I'm looking forward to getting that video series going, and hopefully we'll have that video in the early part of next week. All right, folks, thanks so much for joining today. I really appreciate you being here. And until next time, happy hacking. We'll see you then. Thanks a lot.